The ANC and its alliance partners are hosting the 7th Cuba-Africa International Solidarity Conference in White River, Mpumalanga. This is the party's effort to strengthen international solidarity. The ANC Deputy President Paul Mashatile is delivering the keynote address there. Let's take you live.
Members of the National Executive Committee of the ANC here present, the leadership of the South African Communist Party, led today by the General Secretary, Comrade Solima Baila, delegation of COSATU, led here today by Comrade Mike Shigange, First Deputy President of COSATU, delegation of SANCO. I was not given the name who's leading the SANCO delegation, but I know that you are present. The Secretariat of the 7th Cuba International Solidarity Conference, led by Comrade Ifika Cheti, Prime Minister of Western Sahara, His Excellency Bucharat Bion, Minister of International Relations, Dr. Naledi Pando, all other ministers and deputy ministers here present, Ambassador of Cuba, President of Cuban Institute for Friendship Amongst the People, who is also the member of the Cuban Five, Comrade Fernando Gonzalez. I also want to recognize various ambassadors who are here this afternoon, and also leaders of various organizations from our country and all over Africa and the world who are here with us today. Comrades and friends, Dumela, good afternoon, Sanbonai. We are gathered here this morning following an eventful week where ANC activists from across the country put into action their commitment to defending our freedom and advancing a better life for all towards achieving a decisive victory in the general election later this year. I'm emphasizing decisive victory because there are those who are saying we are not going to win. We are going to win. In their numbers, South Africans as well publicly declared their support of the African National Congress and the vision that we share for this country. Those of you who had an opportunity to watch the rally on Saturday, you have noticed that the stadium was overflowing. The ANC 112 celebration was indeed a bold declaration that the ANC of Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Nelson Mandela is still alive. As the President said in his address, as the ANC, we are ready to launch a citizen-led campaign that will serve as a basis for the next 30 years of South Africa's democracy. Comrades and friends, the year 2024 indeed marks a significant milestone for our nation. These 30 years of democracy and progress for us activists represent a manifestation of hope for a better tomorrow that many of our brothers and sisters in the struggle fought and died for. The sacrifice of South Africans and the dedication of our friends from across the world is indeed what has solidified in us the commitment to human rights and human rights for all. Whilst we celebrate how far we have come as South Africa and across Africa, our revolutionary slogan remains relevant: A luta continua. The struggle continues. As progressive formations from the continent, may this conference serve as an opportunity to renew our commitment to justice for all, not only for our countries, but for the betterment of the world. This year's conference is themed Africa's Global Commitment to the Cuban Revolution. This is an important theme that is rooted in an appreciation of solidarity as a lens to understanding politics. It places emphasis on the fact that it is because of our shared history of colonial rule, apartheid in our context, and global capitalism that we remain true to the ideas of internationalism, liberation, democracy, and social justice. Program directors, our journey as African nations, as well as our journey with Cuba, indeed serve as a backdrop of the development that we have seen in our countries for decades. Comrade Che Guevara once said, and I quote, "Above all, always be capable of feeling deeply about any injustice committed against anyone, anywhere in the world." Close quote. It is because of such principles that we extend our sincerest appreciation to all in attendance for your active involvement in this conference, which unite us in our fervent support and solidarity with the Cuban Revolution and the genuine liberation of all its people. As South Africans, we recognize the rich history of overcoming challenges and the remarkable individuals from around the world who played their part in our triumph. This year, we celebrate 30 years of democracy, a milestone that may have remained a mere aspiration without the invaluable support of nations like Cuba. As stated by President Nelson Mandela, and I quote, "The Cuban people hold a special place in the hearts of the people of Africa. The Cuban internationalists have made a contribution to African independence, freedom, and justice, unparalleled for their principled and selfless character." Close quote. We owe the Cuban people a great debt of gratitude. For their selfless contribution to the anti-colonial and anti-apartheid fight in the African continent. Comrades, it is an undeniable fact that Africa and Cuba have a long history of solidarity, stemming from a shared understanding of the challenges that our respective people face in our countries. It is a strong connection formed during the intense struggle for freedom, and we stood together in the battle against imperialism and injustice. Today, we gather once more to reassert our dedication to that struggle, and we confront yet another set of challenges on our journey towards growth and development. Cubans, like many of our countries, endure dire economic crisis, but also Cubans, like many of our countries, are busy dealing with the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. But many of us will remember that whilst facing this devastating pandemic, Cuba dispatched 2 medical brigades to Italy to assist. There are not many countries who would do that. But not only Italy, they also dispatch medical teams to many other countries, including here in the African continent. Program directors, the United States embargo against Cuba has been a significant obstacle to the development of Cuba. It hinders trade between US businesses, Cuban interests, therefore impacting the potential for economic growth and further marginalizes the Cuban people. This is by far being the most enduring trade embargo in modern history. As the ANC, we strongly condemn the unjustifiable US embargo against Cuba. Waged as an economic war. The very core of the embargo is to make the Cuban people socio-economically deprived and be in dire need for basic items. And they are for sure hoping that this will lead to social unrest and rape and people rising against the revolutionary government. We as the ANC are dedicated to fostering solidarity with the Cuban people and advocating for the United States to end the embargo on Cuba and completely withdraw from Guantanamo Bay. Comrades, we urge African countries to increase their efforts in the humanitarian campaign to support Cuba in various ways. But also we urge African countries to invest in Cuba. It's important that as progressive countries, we must take a lead to invest in Cuba and trade with Cuba, and we as South Africa will lead the way. As South Africa, we are unapologetically offer our friendship to the Cuban people as they stood by us throughout the dark days of apartheid and the conflict that affected the southern area of our continent, as mentioned by other speakers earlier. South Africa still has various Cuba friendship associations around our nation. You have heard Father Lepsi speaking earlier from the Friends of Cuba Society. We are very proud that there are these associations, and Father, I'm very proud that you are at the helm of this. These associations have arisen from a sincere collective feeling of unity with the Cuban people dedication to solidarity with the Cuban people. This demonstrates that international relations are more than just interstate cooperation, and that they are first and foremost interpersonal relations, people-to-people relations. As a result, a strong civil society is essential for the formation of any foreign policy. Program directors, we will continue to build good relations with Cubans who, at our time of need, came to our region and shared their knowledge and skills as doctors, teachers, agricultural experts, engineers, and even today, there are still many Cubans who are playing an important role, not only in our country, but also in the African continent. We will never forget that during the fight against oppression, underdevelopment, and racism, they were right there with us. Program directors, as individuals and various formations from Southern Africa, we express our admiration for them and make a solid commitment to always remember their extraordinary demonstration of self-sacrifice. We'll always be grateful to the Cuban people for their generous hospitality. Notably, a significant number of young individuals from South Africa has received education and training in Cuba and in Cuban education institutions. Some are still training there as we speak. Some have graduated, they are doctors, engineers, etc. We are grateful to Cuba for that, and we are going to continue working with Cuba in this regard and increase the number of young people who should go to Cuba for training, because you offer the best training. Program directors, we must emphasize that our relationship with Cuba takes into account both the problems of the past and the problems of the present. It is based on equality, freedom, and the right of people to choose their own destiny. Regrettably, there are others very influential who have been trying to urge us to denounce Cuba, to stay away from Cuba. We're not going to do that. We will be foolish as a nation if we were to undermine the foundation that has been led by our forefathers, our great leaders, to ensure that we always work with Cuba, we always have solidarity with Cuba. We are going to continue to do that. The African National Congress, along with the vast majority of South Africans, will forever remember those who supported us throughout the most challenging period in our history. We remain committed to prioritizing global solidarity that is anchored in the principle of multipolarism towards social justice and equality. We recognize that the world as it stands is still skewed in terms of power and economic influence, particularly in institutions that are meant to serve the interests of all nations in a just way. The inroads that have been made in the transformation of global institutions, such as United Nations and other bodies, can only be maintained and advanced further if they are premised on justice and equality. In solidarity with the vast majority of people across the globe, we are dedicated to making a contribution to the international struggle for a more equitable and peaceful world order. As President Cyril Ramaphosa stated during our January 8 celebration on Saturday, we reaffirm our unwavering support for the realization of the inalienable rights of the people of Western Sahara and the Palestine to self-determination. We support their independence, we support their statehood. We also call for the implementation of all relevant UN resolutions, including the holding of the UN-supervised referendum in Western Sahara and the resolution of the Palestinian question. In this regard, we have demonstrated our commitment to fighting for human rights by approaching the International Court of Justice under the Genocide Convention for acts committed by Israel in the context of its attacks on Gaza. In an effort to promote a fair and long-lasting solution that would bring peace to both Israelis and Palestinians, South Africa has backed a number of UN resolutions as well as other international initiatives. We will continue calling for ceasefire and humanitarian interventions. Comrades and friends, our message to the world is clear, and we should never be intimidated for raising our voice. We are not in favor of any kind of infringement of human rights, and we are not in favor of imperialist acts that attempt to degrade the dignity of individuals, regardless of their race, gender, or religious affiliation. We support peace, and where there is conflict of political ideologies, we call for peaceful resolutions. As the African National Congress, we will persist in conducting campaigns to demonstrate our support for the marginalized people of Western Sahara, Palestine. We'll continue our support for Cuba and other countries of the world. These efforts align with our principle of upholding human rights, promoting social justice, and advocating for equality. Comrades, these are indeed the principles that should guide our commitment to our relationship with Cuba and also inform our strategy to deepen our solidarity with the people of Cuba. Our solidarity strategy must involve also strengthening economic ties, promoting trade and investments between our nations, strengthening people-to-people relations, fostering cultural collaboration, and promoting the exchange of knowledge, which will greatly benefit our societies. In addition, we must come together as a region to tackle the underlying factors that contribute to persistent inequality, poverty, underdevelopment in our countries in the continent. I therefore want to urge all progressive countries, particularly countries in the African continent, work with us. Let's all go and invest in Cuba.
All right, so we're going to come out of that Cuba-Africa International Solidarity Conference where Paul Mashatile is giving the keynote address.